Thank you for joining us today at the LDRS Creative YouTube tutorial channel, where we hope to inspire. Good morning, it's Tammy Louise today with LDRS Creative. I'm working with the Fluttered Tulip Bodice from the custom dies section and some Tim Holtz grunge paper. The first thing I decided was that because the grunge paper is so thick, in order for it to cut through with the die, I do put an extra piece of paper in there, but I wet it down first because the grunge will accept the water and it helps it to soak the blade down in farther into the grunge paper. And the only section of this die that I needed was the inner tulip vine of the Fluttered Tulip Bodice. And you'll see when I pull it out of the die, it comes out pretty simple. And if you bend the grunge back and forth a little bit, it will actually almost come apart by itself. This particular die cut has a few swirls and circles in it because it's a rounder vine at the bottom, so I did end up using a little bit of scissors and snipping towards the end, but you can see that it comes apart pretty well. These dies are high quality dies, and they'll even cut grunge paper for you. I took the entire side of it off just to show you how pretty simple it was. There you go. And then I grabbed some scissors and I snipped a little bit in towards the center to get it a cleaner cut. What I'm going to do is cut 3 of these out of the grunge paper, and I'm going to create what resembles the effects of a rubber stamp. In order to do that, I have to glue all 3 of the cuts together so that it is thick enough to hold the ink. That's another reason why I decided to use grunge paper, because I'm using 3 different types of ink on this project. It's going to have to hold a lot of ink, and the grunge paper does soak it in really well. The trick to this was getting the 3 pieces lined up completely correct, because if you have any of them off, the ink might grab one of the layers from underneath and you're not going to get as sharp of a stamped image with it. So it gets a little bit tricky here, but it's pretty simple really. All you're trying to do is make sure that all of the edges match and that you won't have ink being grabbed by any of the grunge paper and put someplace that you don't want it on your project. So go all the way around the entire die cut and make sure that all your little edges are good. I even ended up using one of my longer fingernails, stick it in the edge there, and kind of use the other hand to pinch so that the edges would go around, because this is a pretty curvy die. The next step that I decided to do was grab some of the Recollections craft paper that I had purchased. You get the envelopes, and I think it's 20 pieces of the craft already scored stock of card paper, and it was a little bit larger than I want on this project. I want the tulip bodice to fit in the center of the project, so I ended up cutting off an inch or an inch and a half. I believe it ended up being 4.5 by 5.5. Just grab the cutter and trim that stock down. Okay, let's measure that. It's 5.5 high by 4.5 wide. Oh, I grabbed my crocodile as well. I want this to be a pretty feminine card, so it needed some curved edges instead of the corners. I want the project to lay really, really flat. Use my bone folder again to make sure that when I get ready to stamp on this, the paper's not going to lift upward and move the stamped image. Put something a little bit behind it, because I'm going to go all the way to the edges and sometimes over the edge, so that the pattern and the design looks like it was already on the stack paper. Here's my acrylic block. I have some very spongy double-sided tape, and I take the die cut, apply it into the center, and the first ink that I wanted to use was the watermark ink, Versamark. Let it soak in there a little bit, hold it down really well. You'll see really soon I altered or went from left to right, right to left. It was pretty spontaneous in where I wanted it to be. I wanted it to look pretty natural, give the background a little bit of feel to it before putting any ink colors on it. You can see it shows up pretty well on this paper. And that's just going to soak in. I'm not going to put anything on it. Just gives it a nice backdrop. Okay, I've coated it, and now we're on to the crafter's ink. I use it again on the grunge paper die cut, and I kept them in the same vertical position, but I did alternate going from the tulip up down and the tulip down up, but in a vertical section. I don't show you the entire stamping process, but you can see how easy it was to just go up and down and up and down, about an inch to an inch and a half apart. There you go. And the next ink, finished that up pretty quick. The next ink that I used was Color Block, and I believe it was Winter White. I let the green dry a little bit. I believe I grabbed my heat tool off camera and dried it up so that the green wouldn't get onto the white Color Block pad. Now, I'm not going directly over the green. I am shadowing the green a little bit with the white because I wanted it to look as if the darker one was just behind but shadowing the white. And you do every single one of the images the same way that you did them the first time. Gives it a little bit more dimension on the card, I think, and it keeps it pretty feminine looking. It's almost like creating your own design paper. I decided to go around the edges with a sponge with the crafter's ink. It brought the swirls into the craft paper by having the green on the edges. I'm onto the My Mind's Eye, and I'm going to cut the actual tulip bodice portion of the project. And this time I'm going to use the actual entire bodice. I wanted to keep some of that lighter yellow over to the left so that the entire bodice wasn't covered with the beautiful flowers that are on the pattern, but I did want some of them. It's a really versatile die. I found you could cut the wings off and just have a bodice on a stand. You could cut the stand off and have a dress that looks like a butterfly. So many different choices with this die. It's just really easy to work with. This particular design, I cut the wings off. I used some gauze, and I wanted it to have a material-like feel, a texture feel, because it's a bodice die. And I'm taking the Pop Dot stickies off. I'm going to prop it right up in the center. I believe I used a little bit of adhesive because when I put the gauze down, I wanted the actual bodice to adhere directly to the craft paper, so I wanted it a little bit thicker glue so that it wouldn't pull away from the craft paper. Yeah, we're going to prop it up in the center of the project. There you go. Make sure everything gets centered real nice. Oh, Wink of Stella. I just got this week, and I'm in love with it. I use it constantly on everything. I coated the entire bodice with it just to give it a little bit of glitter, and then I decided maybe some of the background paper needed some glitter, so I coated just the green swirl, not the white, on every one of them. Look at how much it shines. It just brings a little bit of bling to a pretty simple project. Okay, the last thing I need to do is put the sentiment on. I'm using VersaFine Black and the Vintage Affections Enchanted Wishes sentiment set. The sentiment is Dare to Dream. I'm going to stamp it inside a flag banner. Put a little bit of glue on the back of that, and I'm going to prop it up directly under the stand that the bodice is on. A little bit of an angle. I wanted to add a little bit of an angle to the project because it's pretty symmetrical. Then I decided to take the grunge paper that I used to create the design paper pattern in the back of this project. I took it off of the double-sided crystal block and I put some glue on the top of it, and then I'm using diamond dust to sprinkle a little bit of glitter on top of that because I decided what I wanted to do was glue it back into the center of the bodice. I thought it would add even more dimension to it. It would look almost like an applique on a dress. We're going to prop that up in the center, and the project is pretty much completed. If you're interested in any more of the information, it's on my blog as well as LDRS.com. Thank you for visiting. Tammy Cunliffe. Have a great day. We hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. For information on these and more products available at the LDRS Creative Store, visit us on Facebook and our website at www.ldrscreative.com.